Hello, and welcome to the Sunset Gratitude Summit. I'm your host, Emily Silva Hoekstra, the author of Sunset Gratitude. Today, my guest is Bruna Maia, a soul-centered astrologer who is fascinated by the intersection of psychology, astrology, and dream work. She's based out of Northern California and has a full-time online astrology practice serving a global community. She is also deeply connected to her Brazilian homeland, offering astrology readings in English and Portuguese. Her previous professional background includes leadership communication coaching and creating people and culture programs in education technology startups. She's an entrepreneur at heart and has always been inspired by the connection of spirituality in all aspects of our lives. Let's get right into it. Hi, Bruna. It's so lovely to see your beautiful face today. Thank you for coming on and speaking with me.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily. It's a true honor. So excited to chat.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to be excited to chat about grief, but it is something that I think needs more airtime and different perspectives. And I'm really excited to speak to you about astrology and grief.
Yeah. And like the first word that popped up just as you were introducing grief is just that it provides alchemy. I think that this is why I was so excited to come and talk to you about it, because it has been such a catalyst for a change in my life.
So tell
Yeah.
me about that. What does alchemy and grief, like, why do those two come together for you? Because I think of like alchemy as magic.
Mhm. I find that grief is also magic.
Mm,
Well, I actually came to astrology through grief, and I see much of the astrologer as the alchemist.
yeah.
And I was thinking back when I was reflecting on this time with you here today, and I was reflecting back on my memory of grief and my connection of grief and astrology, and I'm like, wow, this was my introduction to astrology. It was in a moment in my Saturn's return, which we can talk a little bit more about, which happens at 29 for all of us. And I was having a lot of loss. I was ending a partnership. I was losing a lot of parts of my old self that I couldn't grab onto, Emily. And needed help, and I had a therapist, which was a really good therapist, but there was just something bigger than me that I wanted to zoom out.
Yeah.
And I went to an astrologer at the time, was my first teacher, and he said to me that I was going through Saturn's return. And his words were alchemy to me in that moment, because he helped me understand all of the elements that I could play with, that I actually had in my toolbox,
Mm.
you know, because the sky, there's so many different planets at play, right? But he helped me zoom into one of them and help me understand what was the teaching here, what were the archetypes that I was working with. He gave me language that spoke to my soul, that my personality, my ego self just could not comprehend.
I resonate with that because that's how I kind of I think believed that astrology was real because I grew up religious and you don't look at astrology. But then when I was 29, 30, I was suffering and I had a woman read my tarot and she goes, "Oh, it's just your Saturn return." And I had no idea what she meant. So, can you tell us a little bit about the Saturn return? Because I feel like it's out there more. Like there's more information about it now than there was when I was 29.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that Saturn's return is the one that people most know about. And well, Saturn's return happens at 29:30. So basically what happens is that when you were born, Saturn's at a specific location, right? And so when I was born, it was at 1 degree, 0 degrees of Capricorn. Okay. And when you're 39, 29, 30, Saturn's going to come back to that exact point for the
Mm.
first time in your life. And when Saturn comes back, returns, it's going to shake things up. I find that this is one of the biggest symbols in astrology around us adulting. Because, and I really felt like I was using the word woman, like I'm a woman now. I wasn't a girl anymore. Right. And it wasn't when I was 18. It wasn't when I graduated college. It was at 29. Right. And it's interesting because in our society, we don't really talk about 29 necessarily as being a big year, right? But astrology, it's a huge marker. It's almost like a ceremony of you adulting. And Saturn, the energy of that planet, it symbolizes us gaining our own sense of authority. It's the author. Okay.
I love that.
Yeah, as an author. So it's like, how do you want to write your own story? Right. And that can be really daunting to people. It's a wake up call, Emily. No, it's something where you have to look at yourself in a deeper way. And if you want to grow, right? We always have free will, right? But Saturn has this incredible quality of helping us see the reality of life. And then choosing a path that feels more with integrity to our soul.
So can you give me an example of what that looked like for you or maybe a client?
Yeah, no, I can tell you about me. Well, and I have many client examples too, but for me, it happened at a time, again, as I was mentioning to you, I was ending a relationship, did not want to let go of it, was really holding on to an old part of me. And actually what that meant deep down inside was that I was really scared of being alone. I was really scared of being unloved, right? I was really scared of not belonging. Because what started happening was that relationship fell and then friendships fell with it. Community fell with it. So I had to confront all of my biggest fears, Saturn rules fears. And then I was also looking at my life being like, wow, I really don't love what I do, you know? And I mean, I liked certain aspects of what I did. I worked with people and people ops and startups. So I loved people, loved working with people, but I didn't like the environment. And it was a really deep time for me to kind of get on my knees and look into my heart of like, what did I truly want to learn? And then, because of that reading that I got, it all kind of happened in the 8 months span. I could not stop thinking about astrology, Emily, could not. And so I couldn't dive in right into astrology because I was too scared of that path. Like, how am I going to make money as an astrologer? So that's when I went and got my master's in psychotherapy. Now, a few key things here, right? There was this self-awareness of like, okay, what do I truly desire? And this sense of responsibility. I need to own my own life. And then also this trust in time, right? That things take time. And that's also Saturn. Saturn says, okay, you have this goal. Okay, take the first step. It's taken me 7 years to really feel like I can lean on this new career that I've chosen for myself. It's not something that happened overnight, Emily, but Saturn has your back in that way. It's saying, okay, like take the first step, take the next step, but it's here to last.
I hear the time thing and being 29, it's really hard to be patient. I feel like the older I get, the more patient I become. But at 29, I wanted to make things happen like immediately. And I did have a career change at that time, but it was the wrong one. So if I am honest,
yeah,
I would have started writing books then because that was the answer I got.
wow.
But instead, I went into the wine industry and had like a big distrust in myself that whole time. Like I knew it was really fun. It was amazing. But I knew
You knew.
it wasn't the right spot to be. But I also hear the death of friendships and the death of
Mhm.
relationships. Does that happen with every person at 29, or is it just because of your chart?
Yeah. So in my chart, Saturn was traveling through my seventh house. So in astrology, we have 12 houses and they each have a specific theme. The
Mm-hmm.
seventh house is about relationships, Emily. So it was like fit, like super, perfectly the themes that were happening. So the relationship ended, some friendships ended, and also like who I related to at work started to change too. Like I didn't feel connection anymore to the people I worked with. Now for you, because I was looking at your chart before our time together, for you, it was in your ninth house. So ninth house is about learning. It's about opening you up to new perspectives, new lens. It's the house of the teacher, the traveler, the seeker.
And the wine industry took me all over the world.
There you go. Okay, so maybe you needed to get that perspective,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? Maybe that career gave you some solid ground in some way for you to open up your eyes.
Oh, absolutely. It's impossible to travel and not open your eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Depending on the person's chart, is where the Saturn return is going to make the most shakeup.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So every person's going to have like slightly a different placement. So I was born in 88. So people that were born in 88, they'll have Saturn in Capricorn or Sagittarius because it was moving back and forth. But so everybody that has Saturn in Capricorn is going to have a specific flavor. But depending on the house, that changes by the hour, day you were born.
So the best thing would be to have your chart read so you can, as
Yeah.
you go through these transits, because I know there's three others that you wanted to talk about, you can be prepared.
Yes. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about these transits because, I feel that when you showed me the days or the ages,
Mhm.
I said to you, oh my goodness, this book, I started writing it when I was 40.
Wow.
And I started having, well, that was infertility. My infertility journey
Okay.
started at 40, but then all this other grief kind of just came up during that time. So from
Yeah.
40 to 42, and I don't remember which one this is, but I really had a relationship with grief. And I can see that it could have been a transit. But tell me more about like
Yeah.
what happens because I have a lot of friends that are just getting into their 40s and they too are like
They're going.
struggle busing.
Yeah. And I'll even back up just a tiny bit so I can,
Yeah,
in case
totally.
listeners don't know much about astrology, right? Because I know you love it, Emily. So um your natal chart, that's what you get when you're born. And those planets are they're kind of static in a chart, right? But we're always working with those planets, even though they seem static. Your
Mm-hmm.
natal chart evolves over time. You can grow with those energies over time, right? The Emily that was 10 years old is going to use her sun in Virgo very differently than the Emily in her 40s, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we can evolve with these archetypes. Now, the alchemy that I'm talking with you today, where I really feel like there's an opportunity for us to understand and work with grief, I find come a lot through the transits. And
Okay.
the transits is what I was just talking about, like Saturn moving through your chart, Neptune moving through your chart, and all the other planets, right? Now, specifically with grief, Emily, when I was reflecting on this conversation with you, there's some that I find are pretty universal in terms of being masters in helping us move through grief. And Saturn is one of them, the one I just talked about. The one you're talking about is Neptune. So it's a Neptune square. That's a transit, and it happens around 39, 40, 41, around that time period. And then there's a third one, Pluto, the Pluto square. Now, Pluto's sort of interesting because Pluto moves at a weird angle. It's an elliptical orbit. And so, depending on the generation, you're going to have a Pluto square at different ages. Okay. Now, what's interesting about you, Emily, and I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your experience, was that you come from a generation where you have your Pluto square pretty early. Okay. The range is 36 to 60. And you have your
Oh.
Pluto square at 37, 38.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, Pluto square is known as the death of the ego. Okay. You're like going into the cave of the underworld. You're confronting with death. It can be, sometimes people actually have to confront with death. Sometimes it's more metaphorical, but there's a death of something in you so that you can individuate.
Yeah,
Does that
absolutely.
resonate?
Oh, yeah. Because when I was 37, I knew something was up and I
Mm,
was trying to find a doctor to
mm,
figure it out. And it was 37 was the year we got married. 37 was
mm.
the year that I was like, why am I not getting pregnant?
Wow.
And it took 2 years, 2.5 years to get that diagnosis of infertility. So my fertility, my physical fertility was dying at that time. And I remember feeling it in my body, but it
Wow.
doesn't mean that my creative fertility passed. And that is something that I have really come to embrace. But yes, um,
Wow.
but I also
Wow.
think it's interesting. It's 36 to 60.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. So it's cool because I mean, astrology, it's a study of patterns. So in so many ways, there's patterns that I'm like, oh, it's generational, that you can kind of get a sense. But then there is a few that's like, wait, depends on which generation, because the generation, like 2 generations before you, Emily, they were experiencing a Pluto return much older,
Mm,
right? So they kind of had time to get there. Whereas us, our generations, we're going to experience it a lot younger, which is really asking us to adult, early. Um, but also so beautifully, it's asking us to confront with grief, confront with pain, a lot earlier, like in our lives, and that can create more alchemy for the
mhm,
work that we do, how we serve, how we connect with our communities, how we mother, right?
mhm. Yeah, I see that. And I can see that the world is changing, and maybe it's because these are happening earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I want to talk about Neptune too for you because I think that evolution is so beautiful. But no, it's been really, my partner gave me permission to share a little bit about his story. He had a Pluto square a few years ago and his house burned down.
Oh my goodness.
And he had this crazy fire that nobody knows what happened, why the fire got started. Thankfully, he wasn't home and the firefighter saved his dog.
Oh,
I know she was there, and everything burned, everything, Emily, everything. And the amount of grief of having to let go of once was, your
oh
dreams
yeah.
in your home, right? Like so symbolic. And it's interesting for him because before the transit even comes, we can start to feel it. For those of us that are pretty intuitive, empathic, like
Mhm.
we can start to feel like, oh, there's something that I need to start letting go of. Yeah.
I call it the precipice.
Mm.
Like I know I call it the precipice. I'm on the edge of something and I don't know if it's good or bad, but I can feel the edge.
Oh, yeah. And the thing with astrology and Pluto, it's like you gotta go jump. You
Mm,
just gotta jump. You're not gonna know where you're going. It's gonna feel like a descend.
mm.
You're gonna meet with some of your biggest shadows in there, in the underworld, but you're gonna come out of it. But it's through. It's
So
through.
what's the archetype of Saturn versus the archetype of Pluto and
Yeah.
Neptune?
Yeah, they can be so profound when we look at each of them because they all connect with grief in a
Mhm.
different way. So Saturn it's more concrete, it's more of the father figure. Okay.
Hmm.
So Saturn can feel like a contraction, Emily, and it can feel like it's like, oh, it's a burden. I have so much burden, I have so much responsibility, I need to create this thing in this material world. Okay. And it makes sense, because when we're in our late 20s, we want to make sure we can survive, we can be successful, we can achieve things, right? So that's more Saturn. It's also called the dweller of the threshold. Okay, because there's a
Okay.
threshold we're kind of getting up against, and also the cosmic taskmaster. It's about tasks. Okay. Pluto is known as the Lord of the Underworld. Pluto is known also as the alchemist, too. Okay. Pluto is connected to the unconscious. So it's whenever we're having a Pluto transit, it's about really seeing the depths of our souls, the shadows, the karma, the wound, the trauma.
Mm.
You cannot cut corners with Pluto. No, it's usually, Emily, when clients see me and they're going through a Pluto transit, I say, okay, the recipe here is for you to surrender, get down on your knees and pray.
What if you don't know how to pray?
Listen. Listen to the messages from the universe around you.
Can you give examples of a message that the universe might be providing?
Usually it's to let go when Pluto's around.
Mhm.
Usually it's going to look different for each of us,
So, like pushing up against a wall that doesn't want to move.
Yeah. Yeah. There might be a lot of fear in
Mm.
the way the universe is asking for us to change. And we don't want to, we're holding on to it.
So, is that another place where, depending on what house it's in, might be where we need to let go?
Yes, exactly, Emily. Yeah. So I would always look at the sign and the house of that planet, so for you, when you were having your Pluto square, it was in your first house, so it was the house of identity.
Mhm.
It was a big one. A big one.
Ego death has come up for me a lot. But yeah, the identity of I'm going to be a mother is
Oof.
huge. And I think it's also just something that society places on us. So, and for me, growing up in a religion, it's that
Mm,
is a woman's worth,
mm.
and really separating worth from motherhood was hard. And that is such a death.
That is such a death. Yeah. And a death of an identity that you were so connected to since a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we play with the dolls. I was an aunt when I was 14 and I just couldn't wait to have my own babies. But then I look back and I think the alchemy of this was, oh my goodness, I'm so lucky. I have 14 nieces and nephews, and I have been deeply involved in all of their lives. And if I were to have been a mother, I don't think it would have been possible to be at every single birthday party or high school graduations. And there is joy now where I can
Mm,
see that alchemy, the magic of
mm,
being the best aunt.
mm. There's something about, the alchemy of Pluto is about empowerment.
Mm,
And I hear that in you, like of reclaiming how you want to define motherhood, how you want to define the mother in you, your identity there. And that's what Pluto can bring us, it can really
yeah.
bring power. Yeah.
And I think right before we got on the call, how I was telling you that my next book is a Libra, just I treat my books like my daughters.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you commented Libra, Emily, because your natal Pluto. So in your natal chart, you have Pluto in Libra. So you have a very powerful mission with Libra, which is creating dialogue, creating understanding, bringing people together relationally, right? Libra rules relationships. So this actually, what you went through, this Pluto square, I'm not at all surprised that you went through it with your partner, and in the beginning of, I'm assuming it was the beginning of your marriage, but But partnership being like such a strong part of what you were working through too.
Absolutely. And I'm married to a Libra, so of course I
Oh,
would
there
marry
you
one.
go.
No
Yeah.
greater communication lessons than marriage, I think.
Oh my God, for sure. For sure, Emily.
So can you
Yeah.
share a little bit on your chart where Pluto is for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, so Pluto's in my fifth house. And fifth house rules the pleasures of life.
Oh, that sounds
Yeah.
fun.
Well, yeah, it's with Pluto. It's you find the ways to make it fun. But well, the fifth house rules our connection to children. It's where a lot of the times we look for our relationship with children, but also our relationship with creativity, because it's the house of Leo. And so my natal Pluto there, Emily, it's really interesting because it speaks to the part of me that loves talking about depth, you know, and loves studying psychology. For me, it's fun. I'm the
Mhm.
kind of person that I will be at a party and I'm pretty extroverted. I'll like interacting with everybody, but what I really want to know is things about their soul, right? And that's how Pluto in the higher octave manifests in the fifth house. Um, Now, more intensely, because Pluto brings up karma, like I was saying, and things that can be deeply wounding. Um, I had to unfortunately experience childhood trauma through sexual abuse, you know, and that has been part of my alchemy, and astrology has been helping me understand that, understand that opportunity for me to heal, and heal my little girl and be with my little girl and hold space for other women that haven't unfortunately gone through that.
I'm so sorry that you went through
Oh,
that.
yeah. Thank you, Emily. Yeah. I have clearly done a lot of work with it that I can talk about it, with you here. So I feel very grateful for that. Yeah. But the thing with Pluto, you carry that, you carry that throughout your life. You work with it, but it's also the way you serve, right? And gosh, like even from the few conversations we've had, Emily, like I know how much you have gotten from your partnership and going through dark times with your partner, with your husband, right? That's your Pluto and Libra, right? And it helps you serve.
Yeah, that makes me choked up,
Mm,
but with gratitude.
yeah. Yeah, that's Pluto. That's
Mhm.
Pluto. Yeah.
So I know that everyone has a different chart based on the time, date, what the stars are doing, but how can we use the transits that we go through to help us either anticipate or heal grief that shows up in our life? Because grief is everywhere. It's not going away anytime soon.
Oh, no.
And I'm sure as an astrologer, you can see someone's chart and maybe see where it's coming or see where it's been.
Yes. And have you read Francis Weller, The Wild Edge of Sorrow? Yeah.
It was the best book I read during grief.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Me too. And there is one part that he says, he's like, grief is the pilgrimage of the soul.
Oh, yes. So
Yeah.
true.
And astrology works so beautifully with it because, it can help you understand the pilgrimage. It
Mm.
can help you, especially the transits, it's like, where are you on that path? Like, if you look at the pilgrimage as a metaphor and you look at, maybe you're going to stop over and talk to this old man that's on the path and ask for directions.
Mhm.
Astrology through the planets will help you describe that old man. you know Maybe it's somebody else that's walking alongside of you, and so astrology will help you say like, oh, maybe this is Venus right next to you, right? So it provides you with a language to understand the landscape, okay, of your pain. And that's why I work with it so much, because when you get a reading or when you can go online and look at these transits too, you can understand like, oh, wow, Saturn is trying to teach me. Oh, wow, Pluto's trying to teach me. One, I feel a lot less alone.
Mhm.
I feel in a way, even though I fully believe in free will, but in a way, there's a soul contract here. That my soul has chosen this path in order for me to grow. So I trust that a lot more. I trust the pain.
Trust the pain.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's still hard. It's still
Yeah.
hard, Emily. But I have an image to help me trust it, no,
What's that image?
of the planet.
Okay.
Of like, okay, I'm communing with Saturn here. I'm communing with Pluto. Okay. We're in the underworld. Okay, where's my flashlight? Like what are the tools that I need in the underworld? And it's like, okay, I need to pray, right? And so I might pray more during this time, right? Or I might really make sure that I have therapy every week. Whenever Pluto's involved, Pluto deals with psychology, right? And so it can not only can it provide a landscape for you, but it can help you understand, okay, what tools might I need? Right. So it helps you identify the tools and the type of energy, the type of people that you might need. And then also the time frame. Right. So I totally believe that grief is nonlinear. Absolutely. And astrology gives us a timeline, you know but it's with these planets, it's usually a much longer time frame, right? So with a Pluto square, you're going to be in this process for about 3 years, a little bit, a year before the transit and maybe like a year and a half after or so. Okay, that's the longest process that we have. Of course everyone's different. Okay. But it helps sometimes when clients come to me in a Pluto transit, it really helps them understand of like, oh, wow, this is not going to be over tomorrow.
Yeah.
And accept that. And acceptance for me, Emily, that's where we start to reach hope when we're grieving. This is when we can accept it.
I really resonate with that as well because grief takes us down so many different emotions, even though grief itself is an emotion, but
yeah.
the acceptance, because denial is part of the grief process, and like, oh, this isn't happening to me, or I'm too old, I'm too young, whatever the ego wants to tell us.
Yeah.
But when we get to the surrender, we can't accept unless we surrender.
Yeah. 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 And I love that you brought up denial, right? Because it reminds me of the 5 stages of grief, right? And it helps. It's like astrology helps me so much because when the denial pops in, I'm like, okay, like Saturn's there, Bruna, you're an astrologer. Like you cannot deny it. You have to confront it. You have to commune with it. And then I'm angry at the archetype. Like so angry, like, oh, you're cramping my style. Like you're changing my direction. I thought I was going a specific way. And then I'm bargaining with the archetype. Like, how can you help me out here? And it just brings in a relationship with something, which to me is a cosmic energy. They're gods, they're goddesses that can help me get to acceptance.
So what has been one of the biggest tools for you that helped you get to acceptance? Because that is not easy. Neither is surrender, but acceptance can be particularly hard.
I think actually it's something that I'm developing because of my lived experience. Again, there's no shortcuts here, but because I had a language for my Saturn's return and I saw that full cycle, Emily, that helps me look back at my life and accept like, oh, that grief was really powerful. And so then I can trust it a lot more. Like right now, I have a different type of Pluto square, but Pluto is squaring my Juno, which is an asteroid. I'm not going to get too much into it, but it's relational again. And I have karma around relationships in this lifetime. And so when I look at that square, a lot of my relationships are changing and I'm having conflicts and I'm having to face them and face my own shadow with them. But what's helping me is being like, okay, when you were really scared about your Saturn's return, look at where you ended up.
Mm.
Trust the unknown. You did not know where you were going. You had no idea you were going to become an astrologer. No, talking with you right now about grief,
Yeah, yeah.
And so that helps with acceptance, but I'm certainly not perfect at it.
So if we're going through something, if we're in our Pluto or Saturn, we can look back and look at evidence to help us accept that we will get through it. So does astrology tell us nothing is permanent, that our grief won't last forever, even though grief doesn't go away?
If astrology is telling us that grief won't last forever.
Well, this particular,
Ah,
perhaps like if we're going through a death of a loved one
uh-huh.
and we're really feeling it, or we're
Yeah.
ending a relationship or a job
Yeah.
ends, it could be really hard feeling like I'm going to feel this way forever.
Yes. Yes. What is how I see the astrology is that it's the intensity of it.
Okay.
So when you're in you're in the height of a specific transit, like a Pluto square, you're going to be feeling it really deeply. You're going to be embodying the archetype. It's almost like that archetype is inside of you,
Okay.
and then, a year from now, it'll start to change. You'll have a different relationship with it. This intensity won't last, right?
That's a really good way to put it, because when you bring up anger and a stage of grief, right? That's not, the intensity isn't there forever, but it is part of it. There is an intensity of anger
Yeah.
because you're about to accept.
Yeah. And this is where then I would go back to the natal chart too, Emily, because the natal chart tells me more about your personality and your soul. And so, for me, for example, it's like, how does this, if I'm in a grieving stage and I'm in anger, you know, my astrologer, me, looking at my own chart, I would be looking at, okay, what is this person's unique relationship to anger? My
Hmm.
relationship to anger might be very different from yours. No. And so, in my chart, it's like, oh my God, Sun and Aries, there is a big relationship there. Moon and Leo, right? Like I have a lot of fire. And so I might stay in that stage longer than other people. No.
Okay, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
So if somebody listening is feeling like, oh my God, I am, something she's saying really hit home, what would you suggest be their first step if they only know like my son's in Virgo, that that's all they know?
Uh-huh.
How can you help them?
Yeah. Well, I would say the first thing, it would be beautiful for you to get an astrology reading. There's something so potent in having somebody else read, your stars and read your energy, and then for you to then feel it if it's true or not. Right. I find that to be really important too, because you know best, your soul knows best. And to also understand that you're much more than just your sun sign, then you're much more than just your moon sign or your rising, because those tend to be the big three. That there is the whole universe there actually for you. There's this complex tool that describes the multiple parts of your psyche. So that would be step one. And start with your natal chart. Just by looking at your natal chart, you can learn so much about your grief, so much. And then you can actually create a habit of seeing an astrologer every year, right? That's something that I think astrology is kind of coming back online, after the pandemic. It had a huge resurgence around that. This is a therapeutic tool for you to use every year. It's really helpful for you to get a sense of like, what are the gods that are teaching me now? Who are they? Right?
Mm.
What can I learn from them?
So since grief is in our charts and part of life, is that one of the reasons you chose to get your master's in psychotherapy, because it might come up in a reading?
Yeah, yeah. Psychotherapy has been so important for me in terms of understanding the psyche and how people move through their emotions as well, and how people have their own defenses, Emily. Um, and there is this really pivotal moment too, because For me, astrology was never separate than psychology. Never. Because I went to see the astrologer, my first astrologer, and then I ran back to my therapist and I was like, "Oh my God, everything that you've been trying to tell me is true. I've been working with you for 7 years and like, okay, I'm ready to do the work."
Mm.
Right? So I never saw them as separate ever. And I that's when I was like, no, I want to get into psychological astrology. It's not one or the other, you know? And but there's one thing that my therapist said to me at the time when I was going through my Saturn's return that really scared me. I was in so much pain. I was in so much fear of being alone. I couldn't sleep, Emily. Like I couldn't eat. Like it was really, really dark time. And I said to her, "When will this end?" And she said, "It never ends, Bruna. This is life."
Wow.
And it was so daunting to me. Like, what does she actually mean? And astrology has helped me understand that yes, there is a Pluto square that's only going to last 3 years. There is a Saturn return that will last about a year and a half. But guess what? These planets are constantly moving. They don't disappear, right? So there's opportunities at every corner for us to work with grief.
And on the other side of that is because these planets are constantly moving, hope is available.
Absolutely, Emily. Absolutely. And I think hope for me lives so much after I get through the transit and I know I have survived.
Mm. Hope is survival.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bruna, it's been very educational. I could talk to you forever. You're so
Mhm.
smart and you have so much information. Where can people find you and get a very intuitive reading from you?
Oh, well, they can find me on my website. I'm at brunamaya.com. I also love posting on Instagram. I talk about the transits a lot, the alchemy of the transits. So you can follow me on Instagram at @brew_Maya. Mhm.
And my favorite thing that you do on Instagram are your full moon posts. They are so beautiful and informative. So thank you so much for shining your light in this world. And my final question, which is my favorite question, what are you grateful for today?
Hmm. I'm grateful for meaningful conversations. The fact that we can just drop in, Emily, and talk about the stars and talk about grief as if we were talking about the weather, but truly is the weather.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for that. Yeah.
I'm grateful for you. Thank you so much, Bruna.
Best of luck on your new book.
Thank you.